owlhead one today.
Perfect. All right. Good morning. I'd like to thank two of our outstanding teachers here at Memorial School, Jennifer Manning, kindergarten teacher, and Amanda Tozier, the fourth grade teacher, for joining me today to talk a little bit about competency-based grading. I'm just going to start off by putting out there a question regarding how competency-based grading has impacted your instruction with students since we started this process 4 years ago.
As far as in kindergarten, I definitely see a streamline in what I'm teaching, and then I can go back and I can see exactly where my assessments were and how they connect to the specific standards that I've set out for the students, and then I can take the benchmarks, which we've taken a long time to develop benchmarks for every standard that we're looking for the 3 trimesters, and then I can assess on the standard, and then I can go back and I can reteach the students that need reteaching. And that's one of my biggest changes that I've made, is that I reteach my students so much more than I ever did before, because I'm looking for that proficiency or the mastery of the standard.
Right.
One of the bigger changes I've seen is that because we've taken work habits off the table, and work habits don't necessarily impact academic progress, I'm really able to see across the board where students are and what students know and what they're able to accomplish, and it's really about the standard for learning. And just like Mrs. Manning was just speaking about, I have the benefit of seeing what students need and what interventions need to be put in place. It really takes any chance of sort of arbitrary grades off the table. I can really report out on students' ability and what they achieve.
Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about the transition with competency-based grading and how your conversations with parents have changed?
I feel like in the upper elementary level, I'm able to say, looking at end of the year standards, where students are and whether there's some room for growth and what interventions will be put in place in class during small group time. You can see if students are meeting the standard earlier in the year, and if there's a chance for enrichment, or if they have not met a standard yet, what things need to be put into place and what work needs to be put into place in order for them to work towards meeting that standard. And standards are hit multiple times throughout the trimester or throughout the year, so we can really track students' progress and see the student as a whole learner over time, as opposed to maybe just once or twice assessing one piece.
Thank you.
I think when you sit down with the parents, for us in the early elementary, the benchmarks give the parents such a guide to, okay, I know if my child can count to 30 in the first trimester, that the next time, Mrs. Manning, what can I do? Let's work on getting them to 60 for the second trimester. So they're almost working along with you. It's more of a partnership, and there's an easier, I think, a clearer language that they can understand what they could do at home to make it easy, instead of saying, for instance, in reading, I say to them, I might say, we do visualizing, we do predicting, we do this. Instead, you can say to them, these are the small little steps that you can take to comprehension. So it's almost a clearer language that you can share with them and help them to be a guide on their child's journey, on that whole learner, and thinking about all those pieces. They're more of a part of it, because it's such a breakdown. And again, the benchmarks are so big for us, because I think saying to a parent, if they're doing this now, I know they're on track for meeting the standard at the end of the year, or they've already met that standard at the end of the year. These are the things I'm going to do to enrich them, so that they're still making their growth as a learner.
Excellent. Speaking of streamlining, could you talk a little bit about how competency-based grading has impacted your planning within your teams, and what that looks like, and has it made it easier, and maybe what some of the challenges might be as well?
In a lot of ways, I feel like it's made it a lot easier. I feel like we're sort of speaking the same language. We meet ahead of time before we teach and work with sort of a backwards model, so we know ahead of time what the expectation will be, what's appropriate for the age level, the grade level that we teach, and then we create assignments and create pathways in order for students to work towards meeting that competency or that standard. And we know what the expectation is. Students also know what the expectation is because it's clear to us. We let students know, and students can clearly communicate what they're working towards or what they're working on and why it's significant or important. I feel like that's been a huge advantage to making this switch.
I think it's given the team such strength because we look at assessment differently now. You think, oh, a 5-year-old, you're going to put them through all these assessments, but it's definitely a different lens, and we work together to create the assignments and create the assessments that will help the students to mastery. I think you think of that end of the year standard when you're sitting down and you're planning, even though that you know your students might not be there, that's in your mind. How can I get them there? So when you're planning those the assignments in your teaching, we know, we need to cover these standards. What's the way? I like how you said pathways. What's the pathway to get them there? There might be small steps along the way, but you know what your end of the year standard is. So it's a focus. It keeps you more on track to getting to that end. And I think the conversations are stronger. And someone might have. It was a transition to say, I want to teach it this way, or I struggled teaching it. What's the way you taught it? I think that was a big transition there too. And I think back. The first time that we started to get into all this about it's not just my students anymore, it's the whole grade level, and how can I take something that you do, or how can I take something that you do and bring it into my classroom, or can you work with my students, or can you work with the students that are in my homeroom to get them to understand the standard, and kind of taking that risk of letting go a little bit, that they're not, I have to teach everyone in here this exact way. Someone might have a really great way that they teach it, and you could either bring it in or they could share in a group with your student. I think that was a big transition because before it used to be so, this is my classroom and I'm responsible for their learning, and kind of stepping out of the box.
I totally agree. I feel like you're sort of forced into learning how to mutually respect each other, that there's a level of professionalism that everyone is held to, and you learn how to communicate well because you have to. You can't just shut your door, and that's not best practice anyway, but you really need to communicate and share ideas and be willing to listen to others' ideas, and as a result, I feel like we're all better educators.
I don't think we would have had the success that we've had if we hadn't done the back work on PLCs and becoming comfortable with each other. And everyone is valued as a professional, and I think that if we hadn't done the back work on that, we wouldn't be so successful in this area. I think that it absolutely helped to teach us to work together as professionals, and even across the district in the different schools. I think that was a great transition, and just the best way to start into something like this. The PLC work has been changing to all of this work, crucial to the work.
Yep. What have some of the struggles been related to competency-based grading?
One struggle I would say that has come up is transitioning with communicating to parents, because sometimes parents are used to other methods of reporting out or other methods of grading, and so there's a shift. But I think in general, parents are receptive to hearing what we have to say, because we know our students better than we've ever known them before. We know not just what their general strengths are, what their general weaknesses or areas that they need to grow in are, but we can tell specifically where students are, what competencies they're meeting, what areas they still need growth in, and we know how to approach those needs now, and parents want to know exactly what we know about their children. So there's a benefit to that too, but it's a shift, it's a change in reporting out.
In the beginning, I struggled with as far as the grading, because I wanted to grade them on the end of the year competency, and I didn't think about setting benchmarks. I thought, if you can count to one, my goal is that, or my competency is that you will count to 100. So if you are not counting to 100 in the first trimester, you are an in-progress student. And then the more that we thought about our students and their learning, and to help parents understand, we understood that really grading on a benchmark was the way. And I went back to report cards so many times thinking of that end of the year competency, but really the benchmark it was a struggle, but now I have a better understanding of how the benchmarks can guide my instruction and also guide my students' learning and their progress. And the other, about knowing our students, I feel like I always knew my students and I knew what they could do, but now I know so many more specifics, like, oh, they're not sure on blending words, but now I could say, oh, they're not blending a vowel consonant word, they're not blending a consonant vowel consonant word. There's definitely more specifics that you know about your students, and I think that the standards and using the standard-based grading guides you on what you need to know exactly, more streamlined again on what you know about your students.
Mm-hmm.
So given any of the struggles that we've had, has this process been worth it?
Oh, it's definitely been
Absolutely,
worth it.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to thank you both for your time today, and really appreciate what you guys do, and we're very fortunate to have you work with us, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.